Round of applause, please, for Jeff Garbo.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Lovely to have you here on this beautiful summer's day. You've seen some of the technology, science stuff we've got outside. Priya from Imperial has brought that along. Thank you very much for that.
This is Nina Joshi Ramsey. She has worked in global technology management.
Which was stressful, but that wasn't stress management.
She writes plays, and she specialises now in stress management.
And this is Anjan Saha, a chemist by training, and now works in heritage and arts, and is a cultural pioneer in literature and music projects, so the arts and science together in one person.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Nina. And I really like to especially thank the Hammersmith and Fulham Arts team. We've got Amy and Helen here as well. This has been a week-long festival. A week-long festival which has been a fantastic one with a big event tomorrow, Unity Day at Ravenscourt Park. We thank Bush Theatre for hosting us and making it so pleasant. And now we move into the Arts and Science Mashup, which is called For the Curiously Minded. We feel very strongly we need new ways of thinking by bringing together artists and scientists to fire our neural networks and our synapses. We know that a day is a long time in politics. Things are subject to change, so we're in exciting times, and we feel by bringing together artists, scientists, musicians, ambassadors,
We can have more interesting fights. That's what we can.
we can have a rich discussion. So,
Yeah. So the topics that you may have read in our pamphlet are, one is to do with hospital closures and well-being in the face of hospital closures, and I'll talk a little bit later about why that topic came up. And the second one is on deep focus and in an age of concentration spans, so what we can do about that. The format is going to be, we'll have a short film, a set of film clips actually before everything starts, and that's to introduce the well-being aspect of tonight's programme. We'll bring the panel on. We've got a fantastic panel to introduce you to as we start. And after the first panel discussions, we're going to have some performances by some very talented people here, including Anjan. And then the second panel, and then off to the bar.
yeah, and then the second panel, sign up, and we're going to start with a short film, I believe, on well-being
Yeah.
and hospital closures.
Short concentration spans, Anjan, I just said that. This is why we're working together. So, just sit back, relax, just enjoy. Hopefully this all goes according to plan. And I have to apologize because we had a PowerPoint that didn't work, but that did actually show credits as well for all of the people who had shared the clips with us or on YouTube. And
We can send you that later. But the first trailer was a short film by Sade Adeniran.
Yes.
So let's please call the first panel up to come and sit. Jessica, Sade, Sue, and Suzanne, please. Introduce yourself. So Sade Adeniran is a Commonwealth Debut Novel Prize winner, a radio and film script writer, and a filmmaker. We have, would you like to say something, your position on this panel? Like your outlook?
My position is that I'm sitting here.
You're sitting here.
I got roped into it. So.
Yeah.
Let me just ease in a little bit here. So I don't know if you are Hammersmith and Fulham. It's going to be a podcast of errors.
It's good. It's going to be fun.
I don't know if you're Hammersmith Fulham citizens or not, but I don't know whether you've seen this poster in the last. Yeah. Okay. So hence we thought it would be fantastic if we're going to start having to look at well-being for ourselves, empower ourselves to do something about well-being, whilst they decide about cuts. Let's have this conversation. Now, since then, there have been some developments. I've contacted the MP. I did finally get an email today, which thanks to the MP for that. So the reason for the debate was really, well, there must be other ways for us to look after our own well-being. obviously, in acute situations, as we've had recently, we need to have hospitals, so they're going to have some level of support there. But a lot of it is being cut. And although the data shows that developed countries, first world countries that don't spend enough on healthcare tend to have adults who are actually much worse off in healthcare. It's not like they take ownership of their well-being, and this is shown particularly in statistics in the US, where expensive healthcare actually means that they're much worse off in their wellness. We're still going down that road. So that was the idea behind this. And just to tell you the development of this, the Imperial Trust has come back to say that actually nothing's changing since until 2021. So I thought, oh well, we won't have to have this panel then, because we won't have to look after our well-being. But as it happens, as with all of these things, the council and the MP, Andy Slaughter, today have come back and said, no, that's not right. It's slightly disingenuous, because the trust does have plans. It's just that there's some delays and budget cuts. So overall, it doesn't change our position in that we still need to talk about well-being, and we still need to talk about, regardless of what the hostels do, they are stretched, and whatever we can do to help ourselves will be for our benefit as well. So that's how this came about. We thought of these brilliant panelists because of their various areas, expertise, and specialism, and years of work in the area of well-being. So yes, shall we do a quick intro?
Yeah, everyone might like to introduce themselves. So we have, let me start from the right. Suzanne Bull MBE, CEO of Attitude is Everything, enabling deaf and disabled people's access to live music.
Yeah, so I guess I've come to wellbeing in a slightly kind of different way. What we basically set out to do was improve deaf and disabled people's access to live music by signing up to a charter of best practice, and those venues and festivals take steps to change the access or train their staff, improve staff policies. But what we found out was, as more disabled people, deaf people started to access live music in that way and do things that they never thought they could do before, enjoy music with their families, start getting on stage themselves, being artists, they began to talk about how they felt part of the community and how they felt so much better about things and how they weren't isolated anymore. And I think that's the thing that I want to address today, is that we completely were bowled over by that, and now we've got a series of bloggers telling us about their experiences.
Thank you, Suzanne. We have Jessica Wade, who's an award-winning postdoctoral physics researcher, winner of the IOP Early Career Communicator Prize. I'm a scientist, get me out of here. IOP Jocelyn Bell Burnell Award, a Robert Perrin Medal, and Imperial College Julia Higgins Prize. Welcome.
Thank you. That's really embarrassing. What you can tell from that is that the Institute of Physics really like me. I am a postdoc in physics, so I work in the physics department at Imperial. And as you probably know, because it's really close to here, it's a really, really academic world, and it's really, really intense. And I think that mindfulness and well-being is something that we haven't really considered before. We don't think about it enough, and especially amongst the student community. I was raised by my mother, who is a psychiatrist, so I was always really, really aware of mindfulness and keeping control of your own mental health. And I think that's something that is completely being cut, not just within Hammersmith and Fulham, but kind of more nationally. And it's a really, really big problem that we need to think about. We need to stop lots of things around stigma about talking about it, and I think it is finally happening now. But it's something I'm super passionate about, particularly how it affects women and young people, and then going forward, undergraduates and PhD students. And it's something that we're really not discussing enough, and we're certainly not talking about openly enough. So that's something that I'd like to think about, kind of student-led mindfulness and well-being.
Thank you, Jessica. And to my left, I have Sue Green MBE, a community champion, previously the director of Samaritans West London and the chair of the Youth Orchestra and a co-founder.
Okay, well, I've been asked to come here, I think, because I've had work with Samaritans, which is about listening, which is about well-being, and working with volunteers. And I'm not good at blowing my own trumpet, but I've been asked to talk about myself briefly. So I've been a Samaritan for over 37 years, of which time I've been the director. And I've also been very involved in prison projects, where I've been into Feltham Young Offenders and talked to some of the 15 to 18-year-old boys who are finding prison very hard. But I guess in all that time I've been at Samaritans, my biggest achievement is that I worked out yesterday, I may have spoken to nearly 5,000 people who are suffering distress or upset or something, and hopefully I've provided them with an empathetic ear, which I think is relevant to what we're doing tonight. I've also worked with a lot of volunteers. I set up, and I think the thing I'm most proud of is that I set up a charity Christmas card shop over 31 years ago in Ealing, where we're able to send all of the money, 100% of the money, back to the charities because it's run entirely by volunteers, and we have at least 70 volunteers involved every year. So I've spent quite a lot of time with volunteering. And the final thing I want to talk about briefly is tying up with music as well, because when my children were teenagers, they all joined Ealing Youth Orchestra, which is a fantastic youth orchestra, and they would agree that being part of this orchestra really affected their growing up and the way they grew up. And I became a trustee afterwards, and I think the two things that I enjoyed most is running. They had a 50th anniversary, and I oversaw a whole team of volunteers to sort of run a whole series of concerts for the 50th anniversary. And at the moment I'm involved in running the very thriving bursary scheme, because this orchestra, although it's based in Ealing, it has children from over 37 different schools, of which some of them do not have enough money to attend the orchestra or go on their summer tours. So I love doing the bursary thing. So that's why I'm here, I guess.
Thank you. And we have Sade Adeniran, Commonwealth debut prize novel winner, radio and film scriptwriter and filmmaker.
Thank you. I like to call myself a storyteller instead of filmmaker, writer, whatever, because then it covers everything. But I guess what brought me here is because I made 2 short films that sort of touched on mental health. The first film, which you saw the trailer of, was it's called More Cake, and it's about a man who had a psychotic break. And I won't go into the story, maybe I'll touch on it a little bit later. And then the second film is a continuation of my book, and it's about a woman going through postpartum depression. Great subjects. So I guess that's why I'm here, to sort of talk about my experience in writing those 2 subjects.
You're absolutely right that's the reason I thought you'd be a really good source for us on this. So yes, Sade, thank you for sharing the trailer with us. And that film, when we had the conversation about it, and as I'd said to you, the thing that struck me most was that well-being of every character came into question in the spotlight. There was well-being of mental health for the female character in particular, but then also for the adult male. And then there was this question between the female and the young boy when the capsule was opened up. So then there's impending danger to physical health potentially. And I'm really interested in what made you write that book, because I know some of your other work and it's different to what you've done here.
Yeah. So the film actually started out as a short story, and the short story that I adapted into a film is actually completely different from the film. It was supposed to be a sort of really short, sort of a guy, a woman sort of has 2 personalities, supposed to be funny. And then when I wanted to make a film, I was looking for something to adapt, and I thought, this was short, so it would make a really good short film. And then when I was writing it, I remember listening to the radio while I was writing it, and some woman came on, and she was talking about how she had a psychotic break, and she picked up a knife and was about to kill her own mother. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, how can you not recognize your own mother? Because she said she just saw her mother as her mortal enemy. And I remember as I was sitting there thinking, so what goes on in the brain that switch occurs that you don't recognize the people who love you? And so this was my way of exploring that phenomenon, thinking, okay, what's going on inside the brain of this person who you see? So in the film, what actually happens, everything that you see is happening inside that person's brain, but you don't know it until the very end, which is where a lot of people get confused, because they get, did she really, well, not give it away, but, sort of kill her own child or anything like that? But it was just my way of trying to explore, that thing about you sort of break down in a way that, you don't recognize what's going on. And then the second film, which also deals with a different kind of mental health, was about my character in the book that won the Commonwealth Prize was a young girl, and the story follows her until she's in her teens. And then I thought, okay, you know, it would be good to see, because a lot of people come to me and say, what happened to her? And I thought, yeah, what did happen to her? So I just explored what happened to her, and it just so happened that it was after I'd written the film that I then realised that actually she's going through postnatal depression because of what had happened to her. And I don't know why I sort of write about these things, but it was one of those things that happened afterwards that I recognised that actually this is what this film is about. So I don't know why, you know, I guess I'm just mental like that, I guess.
Well, I mean, one of the topics you picked up, and I think it's a conversation around what Jess has said as well, is about the invisibility of mental health.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the anecdotes that you talked about was, really not getting access to the facilities in any even day-to-day times because of the invisibility.
It's not just that, it's because people are afraid to, you know,
The
talk
stigma,
about it. There's a stigma.
yeah.
And also, you know, when you have cancer or you've got a broken knee or whatever, you can fix that. It's something that you can see and physically fix. But when it comes to mental health, something that's internal, people are less likely to talk about what's going on with them because of that stigma, you know.
And kind of particularly young people, I think. I think it's really affecting young people. That I read a terrifying article the other day that students are going to kind of almost committing suicide or attempting suicide just to get access to mental health treatment, because you have to be so extreme now to be seen quickly. And it was head teachers writing this up, and I think that's really, really frightening. I think it has become okay to start talking about it. There was the marathon this year was Heads Together. There was a big campaign on raising money for mental health charities, and it was a kind of collaboration of 8 different charities. And you may have seen Prince Harry did an amazing podcast being interviewed by Bryony Gordon, and I think opening up that discussion is super powerful, but beyond the discussion there needs to be a whole network of support that people know where to access. And there's a lot, I think what we discussed that you thought was relevant to this was there's a lot of trend to talk about mindfulness in schools and well-being in schools, and there's very little evidence to show that any of what they're doing actually works. And that's what really frightens me, that you have these students going through really difficult things, whether it's at home or it's at school or it's they're stressing out about work, and they go and talk to a teacher who is not properly trained and has way too much on their plate anyway, and they expose things that are really, really difficult for that person to deal with, affecting their mental health, and they have no ideas about which networks they can share it with. And that obviously doesn't just happen at schools, it happens at universities too. And despite whatever level of mental health first aid training you get to, you're not a qualified professional to give this help. And that's what really scares me, that it's become so trendy to say mindfulness, well-being, let's teach it in schools, without thinking about how it actually works. There's an amazing website, I've made loads of lists of notes so I can share it with you afterwards, but there's an amazing website called The Mental Elf, which looks through all kind of psychological, psychiatry, any kind of research, I should not say that, my mother is a psychiatrist, but all of this kind of research, and it critiques it and it explains it in a way that you could physically understand it as someone who doesn't research in this area. And it's such a powerful way to open up that discussion. I heard it on Claudia Hammond's All in the Mind the other day. They had someone from the Mental Health talking about mindfulness in schools. And I just think that needs to happen more. We need to start looking for evidence in these things, showing they work, and then finding ways to access them within a community.
That's one of the things that you said there, really interesting, and thanks for that, because that's really where I wanted to bring you in, is how young people grow up learning about mental health and the stigma that still exists. But slowly, the idea is that talking about it slowly, takes that the sting out of it. As an example, I was speaking to a doctor recently, and they've said that, I can't remember, maybe since 2013 or something like that they've started to normalize HIV tests because they want to take the stigma out. So, there is some movement from the medical profession wanting to do that for, quite severe circumstances as well. And I guess talking about it in the community, talking about it, normalizes it more than it has been before. There's some countries and some places in this country as well that have something called talking benches, which I think they have in schools as well, called friendship benches. Some of your parents may know that. And so if you feel lonely and want to have a chat, whether it's at a school or in the community, have a sit on that talking bench, and then if somebody else has time in the community, they can come and have a chat with you. Now, of course, that's kind of nice to have that human interaction and to have somebody else to talk to, but it does raise the question or the issue that you've brought up, which is anybody who's going to sit there qualified to listen?
So there is amazing resources to access mental health stuff online, and you can get, through universities, you can have online counselling, which is brilliant and is all done by professionals. Through your own community and through the NHS now, they offer online counselling. There's a website that I can share with you later on where you can go on and talk to qualified professionals online, which I guess is like the kind of cyber generation of the talking bench. So I think that's really, really brilliant to have that availability and to have people that you can then go on and talk to.
Yeah, and then that actually is a service, Sue, that Samaritans pretty much built around.
We absolutely. I mean, we're not professionals.
Yeah.
But we're sometimes, because the professionals are so few and far on the ground and so few of them, Samaritans are sometimes the only people needing a listening ear, a caring ear, and somebody to sort of be in the place they're at with them, which I think is what Samaritans can do. They can just stay with that person and not try and make them better. And,
I think empowering people to make their own good choices as well. And on every kind of website that you look for this, the first link is always Samaritans. It's always go here and develop these. I think we spoke briefly before about kind of developing the resilience within yourself to do it, and that's super powerful too. I went to an amazing day of TED Talks last week, which was about confidence, and they had a policeman on called John Sutherland, who you may have heard of on the radio. But he's written a whole book of kind of a memoirs of policing, which is called Blue. And he's suffered hugely with mental health issues from working within the police. And it was so powerful to hear him talk, because you take on all of these horrible things in the police. You take on people's families, their lives, this horrible violence and all of that. And then he was suffering with mental health issues. He was on antidepressants, and he got up on stage. It was at Sadler's Wells. It was so grand. And he spoke about it so openly, and it was so powerful. And I mean, amazing for people like that, like Prince Harry, to come up and talk about it and show where you can get help.
Yes,
I heard also that the royal family might have weren't too keen on him talking so openly about mental health and other issues. I don't know if that's correct. But
they probably. I mean, I don't know if you've listened to the podcast, but he is so open on it. It's so refreshing to hear such honesty. And I think the stuff that will have done, listening to that for everyone who listened, all those hundreds of thousands of people. And it was done by the Telegraph. I was really, really surprised that it's so kind of open and wonderful.
I think I want to say is the importance of getting the message out there. And I think that's something that we understand, attitudes, everything, and the power of social media. So when you get our people, basically they're mystery shopping, music venues, festivals, and giving out their experience, and then depending on some of the things that they say and the way they react, we go back to them and ask them to blog about their experiences. So we might have a series of themes of blogs on, not that we want to, what we call, use it as a medical model where we take each kind of its different disability, but when we kind of have a series of blogs around mental health, then other people start sharing their experiences or saying, well, I had that and this is what happened. And I think what happens is you can't underestimate that experience of being isolated and feeling that you're on your own. And then sometimes if you've got a mental health issue, we want to do more kind of looking at this within our own resources and things that we do, because when we go into a venue and say improve access for disabled people, you know, getting a ramp or an accessible toilet in is really important, but that's not necessarily going to help someone with a mental health issue. It's about how welcoming you are, how you understand if someone's mood changes of that venue, what's happening. So what we kind of have is incidences where if people are having episodes, that can be absolutely misinterpreted by a music venue. And I remember one of the music venue managers in Camden witnessing someone having an episode and his security saying, oh, he's just really drunk or he's taken loads of drugs, and he was like, no, my son has the same issues, I know what to do here. And it just so happened that he was on duty that night and was able to calm that person down and get them to a safe place. And I think it's really, really important, as I say, sharing the episodes, understanding what you need to do and getting the right training, but also saying to people with mental health issues, you know, do come and enjoy live music. Do come and enjoy things. There are people out there that are experiencing the same as you.
Your research has found that it actually makes people feel much less isolated, going to live music and connected.
I think definitely, and that's for a lot of disabled people. I think that's the thing that we didn't really, the thing that we didn't bargain for is this sense of community with people. I think that, we had sort of feedback from people that's always overwhelming, and I must admit, when I was explaining some of this feedback when we got to our 15th anniversary, I actually cried because I felt something so overwhelmed by it all. I get emails from people saying, for the first time my whole family was at a festival together, and my disabled son has already booked his tickets for Reading and we're all going together, and I thought that wasn't possible before. And then someone else wrote a blog about, we have volunteering at festivals as well, where disabled people, and this is really important, disabled people volunteer on the accessible campsites and on what we call the viewing platforms as well. And it was actually Melvin Benn of Festival Republic that suggested this idea to me and put some funding into it. And he said, I really think that if you're a disabled person being told something or given instruction on the viewing platform, it's not going to be received sometimes in the best way from some big burly security telling you, is it? Maybe the message isn't so nice, and maybe we're not understanding people's experiences of why they don't want to do things or why they're getting anxious. But if we have other disabled people around in the campsite, in the accessible campsites and on the viewing platform, saying to people, do you feel safe? I understand, I have the same experience as you. There's a level of empathy there that is sort of immediate that you tap into. And there's one girl that says, well, to be honest, it's like being adopted by a festival family. I've never been good with crowds. Even before I was diagnosed with generalised anxiety or disorder, they made me feel anxious, and I actively avoided them. I didn't go to gigs. But I loved music, and I wanted to go to gigs, but felt that I could. But being that scrum of people, I just couldn't handle it. I just couldn't do it. And when I have a panic attack, people don't understand. It's like my life is going to end, and I just don't get it. It's like surrounded by people, and I just thought I can't do it. But suddenly, someone suggested that I got in contact with the Attitude is Everything, and she says to disabled music fans out there who think their disability is a barrier to volunteering, it's not. She actually became a steward, and she said they gave me shifts that meant that it didn't increase my anxiety. We talked about when I could work and what was possible, thinking about my energy levels as well, and what would happen if I was on my own, where could I go to when I was volunteering. Having any kind of disability can be isolating, but then I felt that I could do it because I had these people surrounding me that said you can do it.
Didn't she call it?
All right.
And didn't she call it a family,
Yes,
festival family?
She said it was like being adopted by a festival
By
family.
a festival.
Yeah,
I thought it was one of the most powerful things
that's what
I'd
she
read in
said.
there. Yeah.
And she said, this is what all festivals should really do and have, as well as the access for the audience. They should have some way of people kind of volunteering as well.
As well, yeah.
So that's just that's a different example from someone who hasn't got a physical disability, but that has got a mental health issue as well. So I sometimes think that obviously the International Sign of Disabled People is about wheelchair users, but it goes far beyond that. In fact, wheelchair users with like the smallest group within that community.
Yeah, that's really helpful and very powerful. Thank you, Suzanne. And I want to pick up on two last points because I know we're stretched for time now as well. One with Suzanne and one with actually Dr. Saga Jilka, who's here as well. So that was to do with music, to do with what you said and the clips that we saw as well. But Sue, a final few words on the fact that Samaritans is there, the whole isolation issue that we talk about, the stigmatization, which keeps it confidential, and that makes it more appealing for some people. The isolation can actually be a killer, and it's actually known in this country to be one of the largest killers, quite possibly because people don't understand about talking to other people about just their well-being. They may not go outside for help simply because they're not talking to anybody else who might alert them to something that's not right. But your experience in Samaritans of whether situations change or not for a caller and why it's still worth for them to call.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about calling Samaritans is that I would say we see a snapshot of something that's happened. We don't know really what's happened before. We just hear that person's version of it. We don't know what happens afterwards, so we don't always know whether the situation's changed. And we just have to believe that actually not being alone is really important. Having somebody there with you, somebody who listens to you, somebody who won't try and make it better, who is actually going to stay in that place you're at, and be there with you and try to understand it, we think is really, well, it's been going for 60 years and it seems simple, people still seem to want to come. And one of the ways I kind of judge that I think we're helping people is that I've collected money for quite a few charities, and when I'm shaking a can for Samaritans, I get shed loads of money, and people will walk past, I'll come back, and we once had a £50 note put in. We often get £5 notes or £10 notes, and I think that's somebody saying thank you, you know, because it is a confidential. We don't ask people who they are, where they are, who they are, and we are. I mean, as you say, a lot of that, because I think the mental health professions are so stretched. A lot of people kind of, as you say, they say call Samaritans, and we're not professional, but we are there for them when other people aren't. So
yeah, and the offloading itself
yeah,
moves people to the next moment.
We hope so.
To the next stage.
And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
but, you know, but we do hope that actually talking through something helps. I was with a group of school children yesterday and trying to explain how just talking about something helps you to, oh yeah, you know, rather than telling them what to do, which we don't. So I think it's worthwhile.
Yes.
And I hope it helps with sort of well-being and mental health generally.
Yeah.
And I think Prince Harry, what he did, the week after that happened, so many people that rang us mentioned it, and they say, Prince Harry can talk about it, so can I. It made a really big difference.
It emboldened people.
Really
I think William got really jealous and he tried to do
He's got a wife and 2 kids.
I
He doesn't need that
so too. And then something you said earlier, I wanted to just have a quick moment on that one. You'd said something about music making your kids feel better, and we'd seen that in the clips as well, about how the power of music. There's laughter and animals and all the alternative ways that we can approach well-being. But Saga, you have a specific interest in music and how that could help well-being. So I know you're coming in for the next panel, but I thought maybe as a final sort of couple of points on how music affects well-being.
I mean, speaking of my personal experience, so I played keyboards and piano, and I often find sort of just myself when I come home sometimes after sort of a long day from work or something, just sitting down myself playing, you know, the piano, it just completely sort of changes the way I think. Like, you know, I don't know what's happening sort of physiologically, but just how I feel and how sort of I react to different things, like getting text messages, you know, after a stressful day, I might get annoyed at another text or another email, but you know, you play 2 or 3 minutes on the piano and then sort of you don't really mind all that sort of stuff. And I think that is, I think people get that because there's a lot of therapy sort of coming across sort of in the music therapy domain, sort of things like musical intonation therapy, which I mean predominantly being used in aphasia and sort of stroke and stuff like that. But it's been shown to be very effective in, you know, sort of helping people sort of develop speech and you know, walking and stuff, especially in Parkinson's
and dementia as well. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the evidence is in stroke and aphasia, as I said, but there is sort of, you know, developing a quite good developing body of evidence in other sort of mental health areas. So I think music it's being tapped, but it's still like I think can be sort of tapped a bit more, and you know. And certainly can sort of contribute a lot to definitely contribute to the.
We could be on the way to prescription for music.
Yeah.
On that note,
let's open it up to the audience a bit. Are there some questions or feedback anyone might have?
On the music thing, I read an amazing study that was looking at academics who play musical instruments, and you're almost 2.5 times more likely to win a Nobel Prize if you play a musical instrument. I used to when I was about 7, but I think it's amazing to look at it because you hear it a lot, right? That mathematicians are actually really, really brilliant at music, and you have Imperial has a course which is physics with music, so you do the music at the Royal College of Music, which is insane. And I think you do see that, but we don't discuss it enough at how much it doesn't only help your mental well-being, but academically it makes you it leads on nicely to the next panel actually, at how much it helps you
I think
concentrate.
it's amazing that we have to discuss it though. There was a great documentary made about 5 years ago where apparently pioneering PhD student at Yale went into nursing homes in the States and gave elderly people who had previously been vegetative iPhones with their musical playlists on. And of course, unsurprisingly, suddenly these people came from being vegetative to showing some signs of wellness and feeling like they were back in their bodies. And it kind of depressed me to go, God, did we need someone to get a PhD?
Do they not have music on in there? Do they not have music playing in these?
No, it was one of those
That's
white
what we need
box
to do then.
care homes.
It's part of the dementia tax.
And somehow, I think great for the person that did it and got their PhD from it, but it's a bit sad to think that we'd have to go.
We have to get our PhDs for something.
On the upside, we're starting.
Another conversation there, isn't it?
All right, so on that note, we have got music for all of you, a few pieces. And so before we introduce them, we would like to thank our panelists for your interest. And if you have any questions, of course, we'll all be at the bar afterwards. So we'll have a couple of three performances, and then we'll bring on the next panel.